What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and back with another cat format video, and it's probably going to be my last video in the format, even though I haven't done too many. I just haven't had as much time lately to do them. But I wanted to end with a bang, so I figured I'd show off this plant deck, which is heavily inspired by a plant deck that showed up in one of the cat locals that we held that was piloted by the Duelist Rose. And I took a look at their list. I sort of tinkered around with it, borrowing ideas from different places, namely from different versions of Amaryllis in Edison format, especially the version known as like Theft Amaryllis, where they use things like Cyber Valley along with things like Minecon and Mark of the Rose to take things. So I figured I'd adapt that to cat format. Now, cat format is the format based around SJC Indianapolis in 2009. If you don't know, it was the March 2009 limited list, so there are a couple things different in this format compared to others. Notably, card safe return is legal, which is one of the main influences behind wanting to actually make this deck and pilot it, because it actually is very interesting with Amaryllis, where Amaryllis comes back at the end phase every turn. So if you just keep a card safe return around, you basically just draw an extra card every turn, which is pretty cool if you can actually sustain it for a bit. And so that, I think, is enough of an impetus to try and do stuff with it. Also 1-for-1 at 3 copies, which is pretty good in this format when you can go into Cyber Valley very quickly. And you can also go into Copy Plant as well, which can enable certain plant synchro lines. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do with this strategy, combining different elements of the format. Now, I do think that this deck is not the best in the format, mainly for the reason that other more powerful decks just like kill you so quickly that this deck can't really keep up. Now, Cyber Valley is a good way to stall out. Same with Necro Gardener, which we are playing in the deck because we are playing a lot of things that pitch cards from hand and deck. However, I do think that the slower nature of this deck, where it's not really going to kill you in one turn all that often, does hold it back a little bit and prevent it from being in some of the more top tiers of decks in the format. It is still very fun, though, and I think there is a lot that you can do to experiment with it further and, sort of push the deck past where it's at right now. Let's go through a card by card and just quickly go over why I put what I did in the deck. So first we got triple Titanial, triple Lonefire, triple Amaryllis here, along with a Dandelion. This is a pretty standard plant package for what you'd be doing in this deck because Lonefire into Titanial is very strong. Titanial is just very good card in general. It stops a lot of different things. And Dandelion, very good, obviously, for getting tokens, getting plants on field for Titanial. And Amaryllis, it's sort of tied a lot of different things to the deck together. It builds into the trade-in package that we've got. It is just sort of inevitability because you keep bringing it back and dealing 800 damage to your opponent each turn. So in a slower format, that makes a lot of sense. This format can be a bit risky. But if your opponent can kill you in one turn, getting the extra Amaryllis summons for card safe return and also just the burn damage can really add up. So it can be quite good. Although maybe in future iterations, I might cut this just focusing on the plant package more as a whole, as opposed to going for the Amaryllis stuff. But then again, Amaryllis does banish for DDR, which I think is a very good card in this deck, which lets you bring back one of your banished monsters. And this is actually the only equipped card we're playing in the deck. We're actually not playing Mark of the Rose, even though Mark of the Rose really does pair with DDR quite well. I think if you want to cut the Amaryllises, Mark of the Rose could be a good thing to include here, because then it does refuel your banish pile a little bit more. But the main reason I didn't include it was because we get triple Minecon in this format, and like, I feel like with triple Minecon, you don't really need the Mark of the Roses. We also don't have Hidden Armory in this format, so you can't like search out a DDR or a Mark of the Rose depending on what you want. So I figured in that case, it's not really worth doing Mark of the Rose, which takes more setup than Minecon does. So that's my reason for not including it, but you can definitely include it if you want to. And I think if you do make a Mark of the Rose style deck instead, maybe you don't include the Amaryllises because that can be your fuel for setting up your plays in your banish zone. Although Cyber Values definitely do set up those plays quite well. And in a pinch, you can use Necro Gardener off of DDR. It's not ideal, but Necro Gardener is going to be banished yourself to stop attacks. And it is very important in this format to actually get Necro Gardeners in rotation. You'll actually see in one of the games that I've got for you today, I actually make a crucial misplay with this deck that involves not sending Necro Gardener. So that'll be fun to see when we see it, which we will be seeing quite soon. Now, the non-standard part of the plant package that I'm including here is Copy Plant. This is something that Gigaplant decks play in Edison format. We can't really play Gigaplant really because we don't have Gigavise, although you can play a plant deck with Gigaplant in it. I just think it's a little bit worse than this style of deck. But it's something you can play if you want to. But we're playing Copy Plant because it's a 1-for-1 target, which we are playing 3 of, because this is a great way into Cyber Valley to start off our plays, and also doesn't require our normal summons, so we can still do things like Miracle Fertilizer and the like. But if we go into Copy Plant, we can do some interesting plays, especially off of things like Dandy and Lonefire, which can allow us to make a level 6, and namely Queen of Thorns, which is a level 6 that doesn't quite pop up all that often in most games, but it can happen and deal a bit of extra burn damage to your opponent every time a monster that is not a plant is normal summoned or special summoned from the hand. So this is kind of neat floodgate card. It's not the best thing in the world, but it can add up over time and can be good against certain decks. So I think it's kind of neat. Now, you could just argue it going into Goyo or Iron Chain is better, but I think, like, in a vacuum, you don't necessarily know. So I think if you're going first, it could be decent to start off with and just have a monster out there to just cost your opponent some life points as they go into it. And I will say one of the biggest flaws with this deck, speaking of life points and burn, is that while we do have Dark Strike Fighter in the extra deck, this deck can't really afford to make it that often. The main tuner we have here is Plague Spitter Zombie and Copy Plant, and neither of those really lend themselves to going into a level 7 synchro. We don't really play many level 4s in this deck, so even if we copy a level 3 plant with the Copy Plant, it doesn't really do much. You could argue that you should play a Botanical Line in the deck just to sort of pair with the Copy Plant for that purpose, because if you Copy Plant the level 4 Botanical Line, then you synchro with like a Dandy or a Lone Fire or something that gets you into 7. But I feel like that is also sort of a niche case. So, like, the power of Dark Strike Fighter in a lot of decks in this format is that it's so accessible and such an easy way to just fulfill your win condition after making an aggressive push, whereas this deck does not have it, which I think is sort of a really bad thing for the deck, and is part of why I don't think this deck will ever be like tier 1, although it could be with further exploration. I think this deck is definitely something that a lot more experimentation and tinkering with the build could go into. And I'm curious to see if this deck develops further from here. For the other monsters, we've got a Card Trooper to set up our mills, also get a draw in, which is pretty good. We've got a Gorz the Emissary of Darkness here that can come out because we're not playing any traps really. Like, we're relying on our Sire Valleys and our Necrogardens to slow down the game. And the Gorz is also like a hand trap as well that can stop a battle phase too in a pinch. So I do think that this is also a good thing to include here if you're building this the way that we're building it now, even though it does conflict with card save return. If you get card save return up with the Amaryllis every turn, I think you probably are winning the game, Gorz or not. So I think that's pretty good. For the other spells, we get a Brain Con along with the Triple Mind Con to take control of our opponent's stuff. We get the card save return, as I mentioned, which can definitely spiral pretty quickly in this deck. We've also got Triple Miracle Fertilizer and Reborn to pair with the card save return as well. So this thing can be very, very good at generating value for us. We've got double Foolish Burial because it is at 2 in this format. And there are a lot of good sends here. We can send an Amaryllis, we can send a Dandelion, a Plague. There's a lot of different things you can use with this card, so I think it is a very, very good one to include in this deck. We got a Trunade and a Heavy to deal with back row. Trunade also has the added benefit of pairing with DDR and Miracle Fertilizer as well, so I like this thing a lot. But Heavy's good at clearing away your opponent's stuff. We've also got triple 1-for-1, as I mentioned, to just get our starters online like Sire Valley, and even go for a Copy Plant play, and then the triple trade in to draw deeper into the deck. I chose not to go for traps here because I felt like, and this might seem weird to say, but I felt like it was a little bit too slow. In this deck, I kind of wanted to have as many starters as possible, or just ways to dig deeper in our deck as possible, because this deck will have a lot of bricks, and I don't necessarily want to run into something like a Cold Wave, which a lot of decks are playing, or just other ways to like clear the back row to go for an OTK push. So I'd prefer just using things like Valley and Necro Valley to make up for that instead, because they also pair with 1-for-1 as well. Yeah, and I went above 40 because I feel like this deck can afford it. We've got 1-for-1s to thin out the deck, we got Lone Fire to thin out the deck, and we've got a, not completely sizable mill package, although the original version deck did play Lightsworn. I found that it was kind of finicky, so I decided to just go with the Trooper and the double Burial for the random mills, which, you could argue means that I should be slimming down the deck more, but there are a lot of cards we don't want to draw in this deck, and we'd rather just search out from the deck, so I feel like this is a fine number. And also, I think that this deck is still in a very unfinished state, so I think that with further exploration, there is more that people can do with it to slim it down to 40, and potential things that they can cut. Speaking of unexplored states, I think that the side deck is definitely just sort of thrown in a bunch of stuff here that I thought maybe could be good, but I don't necessarily know if things should be tinkered with more. I have the Botanical Line in case I wanted to experiment with a level 4 plant. I've got Breaker and Cider because they're both good going second cards, but I feel like Breaker is a little bit too slow in this format, and it doesn't really pair with our plant stuff as much. Cider can be good though, so I do like the Cider in the side here. We get Devil Book, just a flexible sort of way to interact with our opponent, especially if we side in these decrees here, which we do have 3 of, because I think some stun decks could really cause trouble, like if they play Macrocosmos or things like that. Although a lot of those decks do play Dim Fizz instead. But either way, if we're up against a lockdown deck, we kind of want the decree up to shut down their traps. We've got a Torrential Tribute, a Mirror Force, and a Dust Shoot here. just sort of generic traps in the format I think are pretty good that we maybe want to bring in if certain cards are not pulling their weight. These are ones that potentially could. And Dust Shoot's good if we know we're going first. I was debating just having this in the main anyways, because in this format, it's kind of like a lot of the decks that you're facing, they either kill you right away or they don't. And if they kill you right away, it won't matter if you draw the Dust Shoot late because you're not getting a late game. But if they don't, Dust Shoot could be good because they likely have a lot of pieces in their hand. But I decided against keeping it in the main, although it would just be one more card here, which I don't think would be that big of a deal. But I felt like, this game kind of wants to grind with this style of deck. So, like, we don't necessarily want to have the Dust Shoot for late game scenarios. So we'd prefer just having the side for when we know we're going first. But that could be a mistake. Maybe it should go in the main. Smashing Ground and Vortex here to deal with just, monsters that are kind of annoying when they're face up and maybe dodge some other forms of removal or battle. So I do like those. And then Double Knock to deal with decks that like to set their monsters a lot. For the extra deck, we've got a variety of different things here. Most of it's standard. We get Chimeritic Fortress Dragon to deal with machines. We've got an Armory Arm here. This does come up occasionally for things that you might have to do sometimes, which you'll actually see in one of the games as well. Just having a level 4 synchro that you can potentially ladder with is pretty good. Double Black Rose, because this can serve the dual purpose of wiping the board, or also just being a monster to switch your opponent from defense to attack and then potentially kill them that way. Although, again, 7 is kind of a hard level for this deck to make, so it doesn't come up all that often. But we've also got Dark Strike and Blackwing Armor Master as the 7s, and along with the Nextsaber Rebellum, which is just a generic 7 that we might want to go into sometimes, even though we realistically never will. But these are sort of just for niche scenarios where they pop up. Speaking of niche scenarios, we got a lot of 8s for that as well. We've got Colossal Fighter, we've got Red Dragon Archfiend, Stardust Dragon, and Thought Ruler Archfiend, all of which can have their own niches that you might want to bring them out for to play around different things. But again, 8 is kind of hard for this deck to go into, just like with 7, so they're only at 1 apiece here. We've got a Magical Android to give us some life, and 5 is a very common level that we'll be going into, so it can come up quite a bit. Iron Chain, Goyo, and Queen of Thorns are our 6s here, and that's going to do it for the extra deck. So I definitely think that this deck is just my current take on it. I think with further games and stuff, if you want to explore it further, it could definitely change quite a lot. I mean, we've seen it in a more established format like Edison format, the plant decks there change wildly over time, and I could imagine this being a very, very similar sort of thing. But let's dive into the games first and see how the deck actually plays. So the first game we got is against Blackwings here, and we're going to be going first, luckily, so we get to set up our play. And I think we actually have a really good opening hand. Now, we have a couple different options here with the 1-for-1s, but the play I like the most is just starting off with Lone Fire to get out a Dandelion, and then going for a 1-for-1 for Copy Plant. And this is what I was mentioning with the Queen of Thorns. You can Copy Plant, copy the Dandelion, go into Queen of Thorns, cost your opponent some life points here, and then also have the Amaryllis returning 2 Dandelion tokens here. And so this should be pretty resilient, which is why I was comfortable going for the Queen of Thorns play instead of just setting up a Valley and passing. Now, I think in hindsight, what I should have done here, I actually should have gone 1-for-1 pitch Necro, bring out a Valley, banish one of the tokens, and get some draws in as well. I was thinking, like, okay, I don't necessarily want to do this yet because we do have a lot of Mind Cons or Brain Cons, things like that. And if I draw into one of those, I want to have the value piece to go with it, so that way I can take what my opponent has and then banish and then go for that. But I think in hindsight, given how fast a lot of decks can just kill you, I think I should have gone for this play, gotten the free draws, potentially drawn into those value pieces anyways, and also just gotten the Necro engraved, because Necro can stop certain decks from doing big pushes, which unfortunately we are about to get pushed in a big way here. So we do banish the Lone Fire just to have it there, because now we've got a Lone Fire banish and a Lone Fire engraved depending on what we get. But yeah, this unfortunately will not go well for us, because our opponent can actually kill us here. They go for Whirlwind, pay 1,000 to summon out the Sirocco, and then search out a Kalute from that. Then they're going to special summon out 1 Bora, 2 Bora, and 3 Bora, taking 4,000 damage total over the course of this turn, which is pretty good for Queen of Thorns. It's doing its work, but unfortunately this will be enough to kill us, because they can buff up one of the Boras to 51 plus 2,000, so that's 7,100, and then they've got the Kalute in hand to then kill us there. So yeah, they just had a TT here, which actually I don't think would have been too effective against us, although, the Amaryllis would have triggered it probably. But yeah, I think we had flopped the Necrogarden Engrave. They wouldn't have been able to do this as much. They still would have been able to get in for 51 here, most likely, because they wouldn't have buffed up 1 Bora. They would have just attacked him with all of them, I think. And maybe just attacked over the Queen of Thorns as well with the Kalute. So that would have been 51 plus 1,200, so that would have been 6,300. So that's a lot of damage coming down. But we would have a turn to potentially respond here, go for Miracle Fertilizer, bring something back, like the Lone Fire and then go for Titanial, or set up a Sire Valley here. Or I guess if we had done this play, we wouldn't have had the Sire Valley set up, but we would have had 2 more cards in hand along with Miracle Fertilizer. So I think that we would have been in a better spot here. Now, would we have won? I think that's highly debatable. I think it's more unlikely than likely because, you know, they also have TT. And so it's kind of like a rough spot for us to be in. But I think it would have worked out a little bit better than it had here because this is just lethal right now. So, yeah. But anyways, we're going to go into game 2 here and see how we do. So, we're going to hide the opponent's hand as well to mirror how I played in the time because I didn't necessarily know what they had. So this is a bit of a less good hand, I think, a bit less explosive for a first turn play. We do still have the option to make the Queen of Thorns play, which we might do, going for 1/1 pitching the Necro and lone firing out a copy plant, or lone firing out the Dandy, and then going for, you know, a Queen of Thorns play. Now I could potentially just, you know, tune with the Lone Fire and the copy, not going to Dandy, because then that gives them tokens to attack over with Bora or something like that. But I'm not really that worried about that, because if they have enough damage to, like, kill us through a token, they're probably getting over the Queen of Thorns and dealing a ton of damage to us anyways. So I don't really think it matters that much, so I will just go for Dandy, thin out the deck a little bit more, potentially increase my chances of drawing into, you know, a level 8 that we can trade in away. And I'm just going to set up a Queen of Thorns here, make 2 tokens, and pass back to my opponent. Let's see what they do. They are going to go for an alert here, drawing 2 and banishing a DD Crow, which I'm very happy to see because DD Crow does mess with their deck quite a bit. There's also one of the weaknesses of this deck is that it's very hurt by DD Crow. Even though you do play the DDRs, DD Crow, getting rid of the Amaryllis is kind of rough. So our opponent's going to go for this Shura here, searching out a Bora and a Gale. And then they're going to pay another 1,000, go for the Gale, and have our Queen of Thorns there down to 1,100, tagging over that with Bora, or with Shura. And we could potentially Necro Garden in this, and I did debate this. Because I was like, I don't want them to get out another monster here and potentially make more plays. But I'm not dead here this turn. And they've got double Whirlwind, and we don't have a way to deal with that. So they're going to get value anyways over the course of the game. So it's not about outvaluing them. Right now it's about preventing their big push to kill me. So that's not what's happening this turn. And so I will just allow them to attack over this thing, save the Necro for later. And they will clear both tokens, but I don't really care about that much, as they weren't really coming in handy for me with this Plague. But I can use the Plague with a Minecon to do stuff with that, so that could be kind of nice. We drew a 1/1 though, so I actually now have a different option. I could 1/1 out a Cyber Valley and, you know, banish that plus a Blackwing that they've got to draw 2 cards, which I do think I will do instead, because Plague Predator can still get value in Grave. And if I don't do this, I run into too many things potentially, because, like, let's say I Minecon the Shura, go into Plague, go for like a Goyo, right? Attack over their Gale, then have their Gale, I guess. They still have the Gale to have our Goyo on the following turn and then get over it that way. So it doesn't really last, even though we can use Plague to then go into an 8 or something. I think it is still worth going for the Sire Valley play instead, because that also gives us more draws and more options. Now, I Minecon first, because I don't want them to, like, see the writing on the wall and go for an Icarus attack before we can actually get some value off the Gale, even if they do Icarus attack us here. Now I go for the 1/1, going for a Valley. If they've got Icarus, we kind of lose the game. It's not quite losing the game, because we can draw into a monster that we can then synchro off with Plague Spreader here. But, you know, we will be in a really, really tough spot if they've got Icarus. So we're going to see if that's okay. They're going to ask to be priority. There's not really a difference in prioing here versus not prioing here. So I'm just going to prio here. I guess the difference is like TT. They could blow up the board with that. So either way, prioing's probably better here to do. So I'll draw 2, go for heavy. And they've got the Icarus attack there. So that did indeed work out well. Yeah, it also dodges Icarus. So yeah, prio was definitely the right move. I was thinking at the time, like, you know, that this doesn't banish for cost. Which actually doesn't banish for cost. So this was a bit of a misplay on their part, because it only targets for cost. So they actually would have been able to stop this with Icarus, which they probably would have done, but I think they thought this banished for cost. So yeah, so we do get some value off that and get those draws in. We got Miracle Fertilizer here as well to then bring back either a Lone Fire into Titanial or the Queen of Thorns into something else. And I actually decide, given what they've got, I'm going to go for the Lone Fire into Titanial. I think this is probably better here. Yeah, I think it's just probably better it's kind of tough. There are a lot of different things that I could go for here, but if they've got like Kalutes, I want to potentially play around that because like queen into either the Gale or the Shura is vulnerable to a Kalute blocking this. And so I don't necessarily want to play into that. So I'd rather just go for the Titanial here, even though I do lose the Miracle Fertilizer. And yeah, I think this is probably better. Although I could have gone for Queen of Thorns and then stacked for Plague and gone for a play like that into a level 8. Although I'm not really sure what level 8 would be best in this situation. Maybe Colossal Fighter. Colossal Fighter could have been good here. But either way, I think Titanial is pretty good. So I'm going to attack over the Gale. And this way I don't have to stack the Trade-in on top and just draw lock myself for a turn. So yeah, I think this probably is the better play, but it is debatable. They're going to go for a Tribute Summon Sirocco over the Shura, and then Special Summon out the Bora here. Buff up the Sirocco with that. I will just Necro Garden to this, because I don't like that, and I'd rather just attack over one of the things next turn. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Reborn here, which could be pretty good for us. Now, we could potentially go Reborn into Queen, stack for Plague, and go into, like, Stardust to, like, really protect our board against something like Mirror Force or something. But that only really protects against Mirror Force. Like, Mirror Force exactly. Because, like, if they got Icarus, I just tribute the Camellia. And then I guess that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But, like, really I'm only playing around Mirror Force if I do that. And it's like, do I play around the one of Mirror Force or potentially save this for plays that could help me out main 2 once I know what that back row is? And I feel like the choice is just go for attacking in here. Yeah, but this might have been a mistake on my part because they do have the Mirror Force there. Hindsight's 2020, and knowing the exact card that they've got in the macro, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I should have gone, Reborn for Queen and then stack for Plague and then go into a Stardust and do stuff. But I don't know, it just feels kind of iffy, especially because they could have a Clute in hand to then get over the Stardust. But then I guess they would use that. If I attacked him with Titanial first, they'd use it to get over Titanial probably instead. Yeah, and they could just block the Sirocco no matter what I did, and they're probably getting to a Blackwing, so it's kind of tricky, but I feel like it probably was fine to do what I did. It just is kind of awkward given that their card was exactly Mirror Force there. But either way, I think I have another good option here. I can still go for the Plague and Queen play to go into a level 8 and do stuff. I could also just wait till next turn to do this. The fear with this is that if they get into another Gale, then I'm actually in a really bad spot. Or actually a Blizzard as well. Like, Gale or Blizzard puts me in a really bad spot because then they've got access to a Dark Strike fighter, and that just kills me with them attacking him with everything and then going Dark Strike, trading off a bunch. That just is the end of the game. So I feel like I have to sort of play around that a bit. So I bring out a Colossal Fighter here. I bring out an attack, which maybe is a mistake. They only have 2 Darks Engraved here. And if they attack in with the, Bora or the Sirocco, then, I am setting them up for a dad play. But I feel like if they've got dad, they've got dad. I lose either way because what they're going to do if I switch to this fence is just buff the Bora, attack him for 2,700 here. I'm drawing in Trade-in next turn. They're just going to do the same thing again once I bring this thing back in defense again. And that's 5,400 damage for the off chance that they've got a dad in their hand, which, I don't think is the most likely thing in the world. It's not the least likely thing in the world either. But it's not something I'm willing to respect by just, switching the Colossal Fighter to defense here. Unfortunately, they do indeed have the dad. So they're able to bring that out and pop the Colossal. I'm just drawing in a trade in here, so it's basically all over. I'm going to keep the trade in hand just in case, they can't kill me this turn through some unknown reason, and I potentially draw into a level 8 to then pitch with the trade in as opposed to getting it popped with the dad. But unfortunately, they do have the Reborn here to bring back Colossal, and that will be the end of the game. So, yeah, that was a pretty rough one. I think there were definitely some plays I could have made differently here. Again, game 1, I should have probably set up the Necro Engrave, and that would have helped a little bit. This second game here, I maybe could have gone for Stardust before attacking him with Titanium to play around Mirror Force exactly. But I feel like, overall, sometimes you have to play around things, sometimes you don't. And you got to sort of judge, like, whether you want to play around the one of or not. I feel like I defend the plays I make in game 2. I feel like those were all pretty good for the most part. It's just Blackwings is a much more explosive deck than this one is. And it can be kind of tricky. I think once the Plank deck gets set up, it can really do a lot of stuff. But the problem with playing this deck in this format is that a lot of decks prevent you from actually getting to the point where you can set up because they just kill you so quickly. And the Plank deck does have a bit of trouble dealing with that, especially when that deck is Blackwings, which sort of does this the quickest. So that can make it a bit tricky. I think that a lot of other decks do what Blackwings do here, except in different ways, and the plant deck sort of suffers against that style of gameplay. So I don't think that this is going to be a tier 1 deck, but I do think it could be a tier 2 deck. I think it could stomp a lot of sort of less meta decks in the format. And to see what that might look like, let's dive into another game against a deck that is not as meta as Blackwings here. And this will actually be a fun one because, well, you'll see what happens on their turn. I'm just going to start off with a lone Sire Valley pass. I could set something up with Foolish, but I feel like it's fine just leaving the Sire Valley and passing because, what do they do with this? They summon out something, attack into it. Potentially, I get just a Vanish there. And in the next turn, I could maybe make some stuff happen with Foolishing and Dandy, going Plague into something else. Like, there are different things I could do next turn, depending on what they've got. But I'm just going to leave that Valley pass, and they summon out, or they go for a 1-for-1, pitching the Titanial. So this is a mirror match here, although they've got a bit of a different build than I do. So they're going to go for Evil Thorn here, which is a level 1 that I did consider for building this deck. I decided against it because I felt it was a little bit too bricky. And it just it deals a little bit of burn and potentially gives you some tribute fodder, but I'm not really sure it's worth it having those bricks. But you would argue that when you have 1-for-1, it's a stronger start than some of your other ones. But I feel like Sire Valley is just such a good one to go into that you don't really need Evil Thorn. But they're going to make good use of it, going for Miracle Fertilizer on the Titanial, and then attacking into the Valley. We will banish draw with that. They are going to set 1 pass. And this brings us to another benefit of Evil Thorn. You get to do Crush Card Virus with it. So they tribute 1 Evil Thorn there and get a peek at our hand and see what's around. Now, I don't like this style of play with Crush Card Virus. I think I've said this in a lot of Crush Card Virus formats, of which I believe this is the last one. I think Lightborn Format, which is the next format that I'm covering, does not have Crush Card Virus in it because it is banned. But I'm much in favor, when you have a Crush Card Virus setup, using it at the last possible moment, right? Because, Crush Card Virus hits nothing here. But let's say I'd done a play that gets me into a synchro thing, and I've got that monster on field now, then they Crush Card Virus, get value off that, and I lose a lot of what I invested into. Now I can sort of play around the Crush Card and figure out what to do here. And also they've got 1 less plant to actually sacrifice for the Titanial. Now you could argue that they want to use the Crush Card on the Evil Thorn no matter what, so they're always going to have that 1 less. But if I see 3 plant monsters on field here, and I'm like, oh, I've only got a couple targeting things in hand, that's going to change the way I play. So, for instance, here I might do summon out Plague Spreader and then try and attack into an Evil Thorn to deprive them of 1 more plant target, which could make things a little bit tricky for them here. So I do think that, shotgun Crush Card like this, I'm never really a fan of it. And I think it did backfire for Soul here just a little bit. Now we go for Minecon on the Titanial first. We want to get in a take on the Titanial. So we're going to use up our Minecon and our BrainCon here. The way I figure it is we start with Minecon because if they negate both, they negate both. We don't get it either way. But if they don't negate the second one for whatever reason, then we got BrainCon to take it. Or if they negate this first one by tributing the Titanial, then we've got BrainCon for later. So I figure this is pretty good. If we do manage to successfully take this, we do get to go for a Sire Valley play here. So we can get it off in main 2. They are indeed going to tribute the Evil Thorn there with that Titanial. So we're going to go for BrainCon here. Let's see if they negate that. They're just going to let it go through, which I think was a little bit of a mistake, but they might not realize the line with the 1-for-1 in Valley just yet. But yeah, or they could just, I honestly don't know why they didn't stop this, because it definitely would have been correct. Here I think about whether to pitch the Copy Plant or the Plague. Because I think it could be good to get a plant engrave for the Copy Plant, or for the Amaryllis if we get that online. We've also got Foolish here, so we potentially set up the Amaryllis this turn. And if they don't have any other monsters to really do stuff with, then that could be very awkward for them, because we switch from Amaryllis to attack next turn and just get in for a ton of damage. But I think it is just better to pitch the Plague. I'm not going to get greedy here. I'm just going to go for a Valley here, banish both, the Miracle Fertilizer dies, and then we get to draw 2. Now, because of Crush Card Virus, those will be destroyed. We did draw these, but it does get a plant engrave, so then we can actually go for a Foolish play here for Amaryllis if we want to. But ultimately, I think I decided against it, because I'm not upset about drawing Amaryllis here into Crush Card. It's awkward, sure, but it deals with them 800 because it does count as being destroyed, I'm pretty sure. And also it gets it set up for then making Amaryllis plays. So I don't hate that. We can then also use Foolish for a Dandy instead, which then opens up other lines for us with potentially Copy Plant or Plague or things like that. So I do feel fine about this. Pump's going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw into a dandelion there. Speak of dandelion. I feel like this is a pretty good, sort of opportunity for us here, because we can go plague, stacking the trade in there because it's not really going to be that useful for us, and then we can actually shuffle it back into the deck with the foolish burial here. So I feel like this is pretty good. We go for plague first, just in case they've got like a DD Crow or something to disrupt this play. I don't want to just summon up dandelion just alone in the wild. So I do go for that, and then I summon out the dandy, go for the android here, and they are going to wait for after the tokens here to go for a TT to blow up the board. So I think this makes sense for them. I was really worried that that set would be dandy and potentially give them the fodder for a tribute summon. I still felt it was worth playing into this either way, just to try and establish something for myself. And after I established the android, then I was going to debate like, okay, do I actually attack in or not? But the TT simplifies things for me a little bit here, and they lose a plague. So I'm very happy to see that gone instead of a dandelion there. I'm going to go for a foolish now, sending the Amaryllis, shuffling back that trade in, which is useless under Crush card, of which there is one more turn, I believe. And we're going to banish this Titanial, bring back the Amaryllis. Now you could argue that I should have banished the Dandy instead of the Titanial, but I figure if I draw DDR, I'm pitching the Copy Plant anyways, and I'd rather just bring back the Titanial instead of the Dandy there. And if I draw Miracle Fertilizer, I can do the perfectly fine play of Miracle Fertilizing back the Dandelion, swimming at Copy Plant, copying the Dandelion level, and going into a Queen of Thorns or a Goya, depending on the situation. So I feel like this is a pretty fine play overall. And my opponent is going to just pass back to us. I feel very good about that, especially when we draw into Reborn here. This should be the end of the game here, I believe. We just have to potentially worry about playing around Gores or not. We're going to go for a Reborn here on the Dandy, summon out this Copy Plant, and go into a Queen of Thorns. Now, if they summon out Gores, they're taking 1,000 extra damage, so they'd be taking 4,000 damage overall. And I have 2 more summons of Amaryllis left, at least, because we get Copy Plant and Dandy engraved there. And so that should still be lethal damage overall over the course of a couple turns if they do have Gores. Yeah, I think this is the best play personally. Like, I don't know, there are other things I could have done, but like, I feel like this is fine to do. And I feel like it plays around Gores the best. And if they don't have Gores, they just lose this turn, because that's 2,200 plus 800 for the Phoenician Cluster Amaryllis. And yeah, then I attack in for another 22 off the Queen of Thorns. So that will indeed be the end of the game there. So let's dive into game 2 and see if we can manage to take the W in game 2 here. So for the siding, I bring in Lightning Vortex and I believe Mirror Force, because, you know, they're playing decked with Titanial, and those 2 cards are very good against Titanial. So we'll see if that actually does come up and works for us. They're going to start with a 1-for-1 here, pitching the Dandy to bring out a Copy Plant, getting 2 tokens here as well. So they will be able to have those. And they're going to activate Super Solar Nutrient, which is another thing that you could potentially fit into the plant deck. I felt like it wasn't quite worth it, because most of the time where you're in a situation where you have things like Dandelion tokens out, I feel like you're generally fine having those tokens. You don't need the acceleration into a Lone Fire. But, I mean, it is good occasionally to get that. So, yeah, I think it's fine. They go for a Gigaplant, revealing that they're on a Gigaplant version of the deck, which I think it's something you can do, potentially setting out on a turn like this, for instance. You can do this all without normal summoning. And then if you go into Gigaplant, you can normal summon that, get back, you know, Lone Fire, go into Titanial, and do a lot of stuff like that. So I think that can be good, especially with a card safe return in the deck. And also it does allow you access to level 7s more easily. So I think those are all good reasons to have a Gigaplant potentially. But for me personally, I felt like it was a bit too awkward a lot of the time, because there is no Gigavise in the format, so you can't play that. And it just makes Gigavant kind of a delayed reaction card a lot of the time. You need a couple turns to set that up. And in a fast format like this, I felt like it wouldn't quite be worth it. But, you know, Soul shows here that you can definitely set that up on the first turn if you get the right combination of cards. Now we have a couple different options here. And I think I do potentially misplay into the line that I go for, because I've got 1-for-1 to go into a Copy Plant and do stuff with that. But Titanial makes it a little bit awkward, because if I use Copy Plant's effect to target something on my side of the field, then the Titanial will stop that, which is very annoying for me. It makes it a lot harder to actually Synchro Ladder into things that can actually deal with this board. I do have 1-for-1, so I can just go for Sire Valley instead and just try and draw my way out of it, because I do have things like Lightning Vortex and Mirror Force, as I mentioned. But it's just a little bit awkward, because I feel like you know, they've got 3 powerful monsters here. If they ever break through my board, then I'm kind of screwed because they can get in for a lot of damage here. So what I decided to do is decide to go for a Black Rose play indeed. The only way I can figure out how, by going foolish for the Plague Spreader, going for a card safe return here, going Plague, and stacking the Titanial to bring back that Plague, and then drawing there. So this was actually a misplay on my part. This was actually the biggest misplay in the game. I think that this line for Black Rose is fine, but the power of card safe return at this moment is that, you know, I'm setting up Amaryllis as well because I'm going to pitch that for one, so I can normal summon the Dandelion and go into Synchro Laddering. And by having card safe return here, I blow up the Black Rose, and I lose that access to repeated draws as my Amaryllis just keeps coming back. So even if they can recover, I'd hopefully be able to draw my way out of it and make back the investment I made here. Also, I don't need to draw into Titanial. I'd rather shuffle that back into the deck. So yeah, this was just a major misplay on my part. Sometimes I do something when I've got to play that's a little bit too complicated, is that I'll forget key aspects of the play that, you know, I initially set out with as a feature of the play. And, you know, here it just becomes a little bit of a bug. And unfortunately, it is very rough for me. So I think this play would have actually been good if I had not gone into the card safe return now as opposed to later. But I'll bring out the Copy Plant, sink off for an Armory Arm here, and then make a 7 with the tokens and the Armory Arm to go into Black Rose here. Now, because I have the card safe return out, I could pivot the play here. So I could go into like an 8 or a 6 here. Like Goyo for Gigaplant could be kind of neat. Also, Goyo is kind of hard for them to get over with something like Titanium. They'd have to Titanium crash, and that would be kind of annoying for them. So I think that is an option I could have done. Maybe a better option given that I've got the card safe return out here. But yeah, I was just kind of worried about like the Dark Strike Fighter and having the Gigaplant potentially revive something else if I chose to attack with Dark Strike Fighter instead of Gigaplant. So I went for Black Rose here instead. But I think that was also a mistake on my part. Yeah, so I think multiple L's across the board, mainly around how I play card safe return. I should have one shuffled the Titanial back into the deck with the 1-for-1, and then use the card safe return at the end phase here to draw after that Amaryllis, and that's a couple turns of draws potentially. Or after the card safe return was up, I should have gone for Goyo, taken one of their stuff, and then still gotten the draw with the card safe return at the end of the phase with Amaryllis. So yeah, it's tough to say, but I do still have Amaryllis up, and there are a couple of plants in grave for it, so it at least comes back and potentially gives me something here. But I think that this second game is definitely in a bad spot due to a major misplay on my part, which largely comes from inexperience with the deck and just, you know, forgetting the main reason I made that play the first turn here. So that was definitely a bungle on my part. They're going to play around Gores because they probably figure, like, why would I go for this play popping the card safe return unless I had Gores in hand, which I think that is a good read on their part. It's just not what I did because I was just being kind of silly with it and not thinking things through. So I'm just going to bring out a Valley here, pass back to them. They're just going to go for Gigaplant, getting even more value here because I can't contest the Gigaplant. They're going to attack into a Valley here. We get another draw into another Valley, so that's something. And then we draw into another Amaryllis. If we draw into Trading, that's really good, but yeah, we're just going to bring out this Valley here, pass back to them, get another draw in with the Valley. So the Valleys can stall you out for quite a bit, which is pretty good. We draw into Gorge here, which is kind of interesting. We can use this to, you know, actually make the threat real, what they're playing around here. So unfortunately they're playing around it, so that's kind of rough. But we go for a Foolish on Titanium because we don't want to draw into that. And then I'll banish the Titanium, go for a Phoenician Cluster here. I think there's potentially another mistake. I think having the Titanium engrave for something like a Reborn or Miracle Fertilizer or something like that is more valuable than having the Copy Plant engrave for that very same thing. But I mean, I don't know. I didn't go for it. I just went for the Amaryllis instead. So, you know, it's kind of rough. There's a sequence of misplays on my part here over the course of this game. Definitely did cost me it. Because now they're going to go for an Armory Arm. And now we're in quite a pickle here because they can Armory Arm onto the Gigaplant and then just get in a ton of damage each turn, more than we're dealing to them. So, yeah, this is not looking good for us. Now they don't even have to attack into Gores because we are in such a bad spot. We draw into Fertilizer. And again, if we had the Titanium, maybe things could have been different here. Although, with that Armory Arm up, I doubt it would be. And, yeah, so this is just going to be probably the end of the game here. So, yeah, they're going to bring out something else. Bring out that Copy Plant. Copy the 6 on the Gigaplant. Go into a 7 here. And that's going to be the end of the game. So, Kind of rough stuff. As I mentioned, I did misplay here quite a bit, especially that first turn. I think that I would have been in a much better spot that first turn because I probably would have banished the copy plant after that to just keep the draw engine going, and that would have drawn me into more things. So I feel like I definitely bungled that game there. But that happens sometimes. It's the nature of the game. You can't play every deck perfectly, especially one that's as complex as this one, because I do think this is a pretty tricky deck to play. And definitely, it's not in its final form yet, so that also makes it kind of tricky mapping out some lines. But we open up a really good one here. We go for trade-in, pitching the Amaryllis, go for Lone Fire here. Setting one Lone Fire, setting another Lone Fire, and then ending on a Titanial there. And now we'll just go to the end phase, banishing a Lone Fire for the Amaryllis here, passing back to them, and seeing what they do. They're going to set one pass back to us. We've got Minecon plus Sire Valley, so we feel very good about this. We're going to Minecon their set. Is a Mystic Tomato, and now we go for Sire Valley, drawing 2. I think this was a mistake. I think what I should have done is just gone for Miracle Fertilizer on the Lone Fire, and just gotten into another Titanial, because that is lethal damage on board. It doesn't play through Gorge, that is true. So if they get Gorge, it's not lethal, but I think it would have been good just to try and push there. Instead, I just go for something out the Valley and banishing that Tomato, which is not terrible, don't get me wrong. It does play around Gorge a little bit better, but I don't think I needed to play around Gorge here. Yeah, either way, I think we're in a very, very good spot. We attack in for 3,000 with the Amaryllis, and then 2,800 with the Titanial. Bring back that Amaryllis, and now just pass back to them. So they're going to go for Minecon here on the Titanial. I'm actually going to tribute the Titanial for that, because they're at such low life that I figure if the Amaryllis, deals 800 more to them, they are in a really, really scary spot. So I'd rather just tribute the Titanial than the Amaryllis. If they got BrainCon, take the Amaryllis and then tack in here. It's kind of annoying. We do lose 20 on 200, but it's not the end of the world by any means. So they're just going to set one pass back to us, and we draw another Minecon, so this should be the end game. We Minecon their set, switch the Amaryllis to attack, and just attack in for 2,200 there, so that's going to be the end of the game. And it seems like they had a True Nade, a Debris, a Necro, and an Evil Thorn. So, again, like, one of the reasons I don't really like Evil Thorn, they can just sort of break you up here. But Debris is definitely a useful option here, which maybe I should play in the this deck as well, because you can bring back Lone Fire, go into a 7 that way, and Black Rose is very, very good in this deck. So maybe Debris is worth having in the Amaryllis deck. But I do like this sort of build I've got of it. I think it's kind of neat. It's definitely not the final form, but I do think it's sort of a deck that can deal with pretty much anything below tier 1. So I think it's solidly tier 2. Not that tiers really make much difference in a format as Underexplored's Cat format and as Underplayed as Cat format. But I do think that this is a pretty decent deck. Not the best deck in the world, but it's one that's pretty fun to play around with. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, let me know in the comments below what you think of this deck and what improvements you make to the plant deck in Cat format. And I hope that you enjoyed my coverage of Cat format, even though it was sparse. Hopefully, I'll be able to have more videos for Lightsworn format, which is the next format that I'm hopping into. That'll be my next video, going over the new cards for that. So that should be pretty fun. Lightsworn format is a format that I've heard good things about from a variety of people. And so I'm excited to dive into it and explore it. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to follow my journey into Lightsworn format and the rest of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Also, leave a like down below if you liked what you saw, and join the YGO from Zero Discord server if you want to play games in this format or any other format that I featured on the channel. Also, if you want to support me directly, I do have a Patreon linked in the description down below, and if you join the Patreon, get shouted in the videos. So big shout out to Rincewind, Park Raccoon, Brendan Knocker, Tyler Compton, GeoMyFest, Dumbtruck Scout Zero, and Damon Has. It means a lot that you all support this play and encourage me to make more videos like this one in the future. I hope you enjoyed as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, signing off. Peace.